Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, Senate Committee on Finance, Joint Subcommittees on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. My name is Howard Watts. It's my pleasure to be chairing today's meeting. And with that, will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senators Nguyen.
Here.
Titus.
Here.
Taylor.
Present.
Assembly members Anderson.
Present.
Brown May.
Here.
Dickman.
Here.
Hibbets. Mosca.
Here.
And Chair Watts.
And I am here. Thank you. We have all members present. We will be hearing 3 budgets from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources today. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. Please be sure to silence your electronic devices. When you're speaking, please turn on the microphone before you speak. State and spell your name for the record before you speak for the first time. Turn the microphone off after you finish speaking. And then please always state your name for the record each time before you speak so that we can make sure our records are clear. Let's see. If you would like to provide public comment, we'll have one public comment period at the end of today's meeting. In order to provide public comment by phone, you can call 888-475-4499. When prompted, provide the meeting ID 815-3878-5803 and then press pound. All right, I think that covers it. So with that, we will welcome our presenters up. I think we're going to go in the order of our agenda, so we'll begin with State Parks. Welcome, Mr. Mergel.
There we go. Good morning, Chair Watts, members of the committee. My name is Bob Mergel. I'm the administrator for the Division of State Parks, and it's my pleasure to be here this morning to present our budget request for this upcoming biennium. With me is Deputy Administrator Jonathan Brunges. He's here in case I panic and run for the door, and then he will take over the presentation. He's also better on that thing than I am, so. So with that, just briefly a little bit about who we are. I think most of you have seen me present before, so that's our mission up there. And generally speaking, we just get to take care of all the state's cool stuff and make sure that it's there for our grandkids and their grandkids. A quick overview, we have 27 state parks scattered throughout the state. Divide those up into 4 regions, east, west, south, and the Tahoe region. 150,000 acres plus or minus, and over 280 full-time and seasonal staff. We actually have 290, and 49 of those are commissioned peace officers. Quick, there we go. All right, here's a little bit about what we do. Protection, education, outdoor adventure, protection. Basically, we protect the resources from the visitors from the resources, the visitors from other visitors, and occasionally visitors from themselves. We do a lot of educational programming, a lot of school programs for kids and guided hikes, that type of stuff. And really, kind of our bread and butter is the outdoor adventure, right? What we are really the proudest of is providing low-cost entertainment and places for families to go and just spend time with each other. So our main budget account is 4162, and that's, I guess, what we're all gathered here today for. As you can see, our biennial budget is about $62 million. Mentioned earlier how many staff we have. Currently, we have 157 full-time equivalent. With the ones that are presented in this budget, it would go to 162 in the first year and 166 by the second year. That general, or the budget that we have there, as you can see, about half of our budget is made up of general fund. The rest of it is pretty much user fees and a couple of other things thrown in there like marina gas tax. So with that, we'll jump right into the enhancements that we that are currently listed in our budget. So the first thing is on the back side of this paper. So our first item is an ASO 4 position. Our system has grown a lot over the years. As I mentioned, our budget is $62 million as presented for the biennium. Going back to just 2019, $32 million was our biennial budget. So we've gotten a lot bigger. Our budget has gotten a lot more complex, and so we need that higher level accounting staff to help us manage that. So our second item up there is body-worn cameras and dash cameras. I mentioned we have 57 officers. Not all of those are in the field on a daily basis, so this request is for 45 body cams, which will allow us a couple to keep in reserve so that if one goes down, we can replace that quickly. So we're not mandated to have body cams, but as most of you probably know, we did have our first officer-involved fatal shooting this last year, and none of that was recorded on video. So it's important to have that evidence in the unfortunate event that something like that happens. And along that same regard, the next request is for 9 new commission positions. We need a park supervisor at Dayton. Right now, that park is unstaffed. There's nobody out there at all. And then 8 park ranger positions that'll be scattered around the parks, or scattered around the state at the parks that currently don't have enough staff at them. And then the last thing on this item is the seasonal to full-time positions. This actually is just making this change permanent. We were able to get this change in effect through the interim finance committee. So now it's built into our budget to make it permanent moving forward. Next is the grazing lease transfer. This has an accompanying bill right now that what we're trying to do is we have several parks that have grazing leases. We receive the money for those grazing leases, but it has to be spent in the same year that we bring it in. That makes it difficult to do any larger projects because it's not enough money to actually save it to do something larger. So we end up buying T-posts and barbed wire to just spend it out. What we're asking to do is to move that money into a maintenance account that we already have that's non-reversionary, and that'll allow us, especially for the parks that have smaller grazing leases where they only get a couple $1,000s a year, it'll allow them to save that up and actually do some meaningful projects on that property without requiring any general fund to come in and fill those. The next one's retail storekeeper. This is pretty much the exact same thing as what I just talked about in our other E303. We already have this approved through the interim finance committee. We're just trying to make this retail storekeeper position permanent moving forward. The next one is dealing with our reservation system. This is because the ARPA funding is sunsetting, so we're going to have to start paying for that system in a different way since the ARPA funding will no longer be available. I'm expecting some questions on that one later, so I will just move on. The next one is replacing lodging tax that we get currently from Department of Tourism, and that money right now, we get it through a transfer from lodging tax. This is to remove that funding, but we are dependent on that funding for seasonal positions. That's how we fund the majority of our seasonal positions. So if that funding goes away, we definitely would have to backfill that with general fund. Okay. The next one is the adding in the revenue or the funding that we're going to need for the reservation system that we're losing from the ARPA funding. And the next one is the continuing the management analyst position. that runs the reservation system. So that reservation system is very complex, and it won't run without a person to oversee it. The next one is IT consolidation that's happening at the department level. So this is taking the funding that we currently have for our geographic information system analyst and moving it to the department. Next, the fun stuff. So we have a lot of equipment needs, and so now we're into our list of one-shot stuff. So the first one is just the equipment that's going to be needed in order to accompany the 9 new positions. So there's vehicles with the law enforcement equipment that is needed, and the other associated equipment that those officers are going to need. Next one is computer replacement. I think it's 32 computers in the first year and a server, and then 34 computers in the second year. 70 replacement vehicles, all of which are have exceeded the replacement schedule in SAM. I think we have close to 90 vehicles that meet that right now, but this is will take care of the lion's share of the ones that need to be replaced. Replacement UTVs. We rely on a lot of those for our seasonal employees. They're cheaper than running full-size pickup trucks and that type of thing, but they do wear out just like everything else does. So right now, 10 of those are in need of replacement. Next is replacement excavators and skid steer tractors. We use those things a ton, but again, they all have a life expectancy, and this is to replace several of those throughout the state. Vehicle diagnostic equipment. So we have over 200 light-duty pickup trucks in our fleet. We have equipment mechanics that work on them, but of course, we have to have diagnostic equipment because these days they're computers. You got to plug them in so that it can tell you what's broken. Next is some mower replacements. This replaces a number of mowers that we currently have in use, and we're trying to replace some residential grade mowers with commercial mowers because that's what's needed at all of our parks as often as they're used and the amount of grass that we mow. Next is just miscellaneous field equipment. So this is stuff like weed eaters, leaf blowers, all of that kind of stuff, just kind of handheld stuff that also wears out, but that we don't have money built into our current budget to replace. And then communications equipment, so replacing basically radios. All of our staff rely on handheld radios and vehicle-mounted mobile radios. And then last on the list there is deferred maintenance. This is requesting $5 million over the course of the next biennium to just make repairs and park improvements throughout the state. So we have about $100 million worth of projects that we would like to get done, but this will take care of some of it. So that's all of our budget items, and I'll be happy to take some questions on that, but I'd like to leave you with some of this information. Our kind of division challenges, expanding seasons. So when I started as a seasonal back in the mid-'80s, our season was pretty much Memorial Day to Labor Day. That was it. You were busy for those 3 months, and then the rest of the year it was not that busy. It was pretty tame. Well, now that's not the case. In all of our parks, those shoulder seasons have expanded, and our busy seasons are every bit of 6-7 months in some places, and 11 months and 28 days in some of the other ones. So that's been a challenge for us, and we rely heavily on seasonals, but our seasonals are only there for 3 to 6, at the most 9 months. So that's become a big challenge for us, is just our permanent staff it's just not adequate in order to run parks that are busy 12 months of the year. Recruitment and retention, we actually have a pretty good vacancy rate when you compare us to other agencies, but this is just a thing for everybody these days. It is a challenge to fill positions. Our seasonal positions that used to be pretty well paid, and our seasonals get benefits just like everybody else does. But now so do employees that are working at in the private sector. You work for us and you get whatever it is, $13 an hour. You can go work at Chick-fil-A for 20. So that's a challenge for us. And some of our rural locations, with fuel costs being what they are, by the time somebody drives out to the park for the day, or like around here, if somebody has to drive from down here up to Sand Harbor every day, that gets expensive. So filling our seasonal positions is more challenging than filling our permanent positions, generally speaking. Obviously, more severe storms, wildfires, all of that stuff is a big impact for us. Aging facilities, like I mentioned earlier with the deferred maintenance request, we have a lot of our parks that were built back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. All of those structures are getting older. And then, as I mentioned earlier, resource protection, that's always a challenge. You have 1 million people coming into your park, they're gonna do some damage, and then we have to go back in there and do our best to fix it. But here's some I guess fun stuff that I wanted to bring up to everybody. I think most of you probably know that we got last session we were able to secure some money for a new visitor center down at Valley of Fire. That thing is moving right along and still on pace to be open in October of this year, is what we're shooting for. So it's going to be pretty cool. We've been doing a lot of planning at Van Sickle Bi-State Park up in the Tahoe area. So we've gone through a planning phase. So we'll have construction documents for a new visitor center, residences up there. We need to get that stuff in place, and then we can move towards putting in some camping facilities and get that park fully open to the public. So Fort Churchill Museum, that museum has, I think, had the same exhibits in it since my mom went there when she was a kid. So there's been some very minor changes over the years, but not many. So on the bright side, I can take her back there and she's like, hey, I remember all this stuff. And then Sand Harbor, we're doing the same thing, a new master plan there. We're looking to just completely reimagine what that could look like. And we have a variety of different strategies. So we're looking at a full nuclear option where you just go in and just redo the whole thing. And then we're looking at other things where we just spruce some stuff up. So there will be a lot of options for us moving forward with that once that design is done. And then here's some events that you guys might want to come participate in if you find the time. So we have Cosmos in the Desert. That's going to be an opportunity to get people out to Lahontan for something other than getting drunk and acting dumb. So it'll be a time for people to come out, and we'll have stargazing. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not limiting what people can do, but you go out there and do some stargazing. So that's coming up. That's Bear Fest, not Beer Fest. So that's up at Spooner. We did that last year, and that was a great success also. I think you guys know we have day use reservations now at Big Bend of the Colorado down in Laughlin. And we started them up at Sand Harbor on the weekends at the end of last season. Worked really good. And so those are in place for 7 days a week now as we move into spring and summer of this year. So we're expecting that's going to help with the traffic congestion up there. We'll still have issues because we're always going to have some issues up there, but this should vastly alleviate the issues that we're having up there with traffic in the mornings. Some other couple agency highlights. This one is another event that we're going to be holding. Cave Lake, that dam has been under repair since 2019. Repairs are finally done. The lake is full. So We're going to have a grand reopening on Saturday, June 7th. So you're all invited to bring your families out. And I was going to have some activities out there. And we might even have Carson Kid Fox, our new, I was going to bring Carson in today, but I didn't want him to get jammed up coming through security. So, all right, with that, my favorite part of this whole thing is the question and answer period. So,
You are under oath, Mr. Mergell.
I actually enjoy, Bob Mergell for the record, I enjoyed this part.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was informative and entertaining at times. I was tempted to ask you what the 2 to 3 days are that those parks are that are no longer in the season, but I don't want to have you sprinting out the door any sooner. I do notice too that many people are actually aligned as close to the door as possible.
Right.
And I'll just say I'm really excited to know that all of those challenges you mentioned will be addressed before your retirement. So we do have some questions from members. I believe we will start with Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, thank you for that great presentation and really just showing us what we have in our state. So thank you so much. I'm going to go back to slide 6, please. I had some questions on those. If you could, you touched on it, but would love to get more information. Just briefly discuss the general law enforcement concerns in the state park system and how you see filling the recommended commission positions would have an overall effect on operations at the parks.
Bob Mergell for the record, through you, Chair Watts, to Assembly Member. So our law enforcement challenges are, we run parks that are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we, like I mentioned, we're responsible for resource protection, visitor protection, all of that stuff. So when you have people that in your facilities literally every day, 24 hours a day, you can't cover that with 2 people, right? It's impossible. If we're working 5 days a week, you need a minimum of 4 people. And if they agree to never take any like annual leave or sick leave, then you can cover that with 4 people. And we don't have 4 people at virtually any of our parks. We have a couple where we have that level of staffing, but those are parks that get 1 million people a year, and so you still can't cover that. Our parks have, our rangers respond to everything that your average sheriff or city police officer responds to. We have domestics, we have DUIs, we have assaults, batteries, we have, like, you name it, and we have dealt with it. So add into that most of our parks are very remote. So if something happens up at Wild Horse, it's 67 miles north of Elko. I worked up there. My closest backup was about an hour away. I mean, maybe closer if they happen to be cruising up that highway, but you were going to be there for a while before any backup got to you. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate those details and understanding the context. So thank you. And there's my follow-up, please, Chair. And then my second question really was on, it's so interesting, the increase of the budget since 2019. So good to know that. And I know in here it has the new Administrative Services Officer position. So if you could just talk about what operational benefits you see from that position.
Sure, Bob Mergell for the record. So currently, we have an ASO2 position is our highest fiscal position. And that person reports directly to me. So when we're doing budget builds and all of that kind of stuff, I'm like the backup to that person, and I shouldn't be the backup to that person. I don't know the fiscal systems. I'm a park ranger. So Our ASO2 has to do all of your daily bill paying stuff. They have no higher level support for review or for any kind of auditing. So they're reviewing their own work, which is any of us that have to review our own work, we know we're not the greatest reviewers, right? You read it the way you think you wrote it, and that's not always the way you really wrote it. And the same thing happens with numbers. You put them in there, it makes sense to you, but once you see them over and over again, you just can't find your own errors. And so we've had a lot of challenges with that. With our budgets have become so complex that we just need a higher level of oversight and somebody that knows the state fiscal systems and can actually offer support. Because I would love to be able to, but I just can't.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. And thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the entertainment along the way, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning. I really appreciate that. I was going to ask for permission to ask several questions, but now I'm the chair, so I have permission. Okay. Thank you, Senator Taylor. You're welcome. Okay, so I want to go to a decision unit, E278, the same slide, but it's really about the body cams and the dash cams. Ask a couple questions about those. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can give us just a little bit more on your need to implement the use of them. Let's start with that.
Sure, Bob Miguel for the record. So the body cams are something, we're one of the only law enforcement agencies that isn't required to wear them. So we don't have them, right? Since we're not required to have them, we didn't buy them, and so we don't have them. Problem is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times our officers are on scene for a very long time before any backup can show up. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's our officer's word against whoever else happens to be there, right? It just becomes nobody can prove anything. So it becomes kind of a he said, she said thing. There was a time where law enforcement officers were held in a higher regard, and that what they said carried a little bit more weight than who they were arresting, right? That has changed. That's the more stuff that comes out on video, the more people have found out that we're all just people, right? And so having something to document what's actually happening and be able to present that in court is beneficial to everybody, right? It keeps the law enforcement officer honest, if you will, because everything is being recorded. So there's pluses and minuses to it like anything else. It becomes a technological thing, and if it breaks, then it's, well, what, did it really break, or did the person just turn it off because they didn't want something, to be seen or something like that? And so it doesn't fix everything in the world, but it does provide that extra level of an impartial witness that's at every scene, right? Because it's recording.
I appreciate that, Administrator. You mentioned that it isn't required, and so I'm wondering, so then would it be fully used because it isn't required? And then a follow-up to that would be, since it isn't mandated by statute, do you think it needs to be mandated so we can encourage usage?
Bob Miguel for the record. No, because our policy will be such that it will outline very clearly when it's needed. One of the reasons that we're not currently required to wear them is because our park rangers wear a lot of different hats. So I mentioned earlier that we depend a lot on seasonal staff. Well, in those off seasons, when we don't have any seasonal staff, our park rangers are the ones out cleaning bathrooms, fixing fence, cutting firewood, cutting hazard trees. So if they're out doing those activities, we always keep our equipment in the truck, like our law enforcement equipment, our gun and duty belt, all that kind of stuff. But if a call comes in and we have to respond like immediately to a thing, I don't want our people to be in violation of any statute or any whatever because they didn't have time to put on the body cam. So if they're doing janitorial services and they get called for service and they're in their truck or somebody just wanders up and it turns into something, I don't want them to be in violation of a law. Our policy will be written where when they're doing like out on patrol doing traditional law enforcement duties, they will be mandated by policy to wear the appropriate camera and have that available. But in the off season, if they're in low profile gear and they're doing other activities, then it wouldn't be a requirement. So.
Thank you for that. It makes sense. Certainly, of course, I'd be concerned that that'll be the time when we don't have the camera, when we might need the camera, right? But I understand what you're saying. It makes sense. You talked about your, obviously you're going to put it in policy and so on. Can you talk about the implementation, the training of it? When would you expect it to be, for your staff to begin using it? I know you're going to get a couple extras just in case. I think that's a good idea. Can you kind of talk us through that a little bit?
Sure, Bob Mergel for the record. So we have a law enforcement training specialist. That's a position that we have within our agency. He's the head trainer, if you will. He makes sure that all of our staff are properly trained on stuff. He's currently working on a policy for these things because we don't have them. We don't have a policy on them. So he's actively working on that so that should these get funded, we'll be prepared by July when we actually can start purchasing the body cams. So there's training available out there because, like I said, most agencies in the state require them. And what we're asking to purchase is an actual camera service, if you will. So the camera service will do all of the storage of the digital images and that type of stuff, because that's one of the other issues with cameras is the whole chain of custody thing. So the officer, me as an officer, if I have the camera, I can't have access to the video, the images in that, right? Because I don't want to be able to manipulate that. So we're going to pay for an actual service that will handle that. So a lot of that training, I would presume, is going to come from whoever that company is that we select, because it'll be their equipment that they'll have to teach us how to use.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about the data retention and that whole thing. So just one last question on that. The amount is $154,000 and some change, and you said it's a service. Does that mean do we own the equipment, or is that for leasing their equipment and for that? How does that work? Is it like a subscription? Like Verizon, you get a free phone, but it isn't really free.
Bob Mergel, for the record, yes, I believe that's the way it's going. So the thing with that is that way you can keep your equipment up to date. So if we're not owning the equipment, then we're when one breaks, we can cycle it, and they're responsible for getting us another one. So that's how we envision this working. Is that when the equipment gets upgraded, they send us new equipment because it's so that way we don't fall behind, as with any other kind of technology thing.
So thank you, Administrator. I appreciate it so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a follow-up question along the same topic. The $154,000 per fiscal year, does that? First, let me start with a comment. When it comes to body cam and dash cam, the largest expense is actually the data storage for those things. Does that $154,000 include data storage? And if so, where in the world did we come up with that number?
Bob Mergel, for the record, yes, it includes storage. And as I mentioned earlier, our law enforcement training specialist, we had him look into what what services are available out there, and that's the one that he found. So we have a quote, for lack of a better term, I guess, from a company that's what the cost would be, broken down per officer and then multiplied by the number of officers that we have.
Thank you. And I may have missed it. Did you address the retention policy as to how long you're going to hold this data?
Bob Mergel, for the record, we don't have body cams, so I don't know what the actual retention schedule is for that. But whatever the industry standard is, that's what we will follow.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple of questions now. And this really relates to some of the continuation of services funded with American Rescue Plan funds. So you're very astute when you realize there'd be some questions on that. Yep, I see you. We're going to have security lock the doors. So I think, first of all, can you just give us an update on what the current status of the reservation system is? I believe that it is being kind of phased out and being rolled out to different parks and things. So can you just kind of tell us what the status of the project is at this point and kind of where you also see it headed over the course of the upcoming biennium?
Sure, Bob Mergel for the record. So our reservation system is pretty much completely rolled out now. So we had started with the day use portion of it, the day use reservations at Big Bend, so that we could get our heads wrapped around how that was going to work. And then we implemented it at the very tail end of last summer up at Sand Harbor, which is really what was driving the need for day use reservations. So it worked good on the weekends that we used it for. And so that is now fully implemented for this upcoming season. So with that, the reservation system will be as fully functional as it's capable of being, and we'll see how it works up at Sand Harbor for the entire season. So with that, I'll just go into a little bit more detail on the reservation system and how it was kind of structured. So reservation systems, generally speaking, can be built in multiple ways, right? So you can build it with all of the costs of the reservation system being directed straight to the park visitor, right? So the visitor pays a fee, and that fee is high enough that that pays for everything having to do with the reservation system. Or you can go to the extreme other end of the scale and just pay for the reservation system, and then it's free to the visitor. That's not a good model. If you do that and then the system goes down, there's no incentive for the vendor to get it up and running again because they're not losing anything. So they'll fix it when they get around to it, right? So the state decided to go somewhere in the middle and not have as high of a cost to the consumer, but still have it so that the vendor has skin in the game. They have to keep the system operational, or else they're not making money either. So that's the way we went, is with a hybrid version, and because of that, we funded it with ARPA funding, and then the reservation fees are split, part to us and part to the reservation system vendor. So there's enough money theoretically for us to still pay for our position that oversees the reservation system, but there's just not enough money coming in to pay for everything. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes, and I will get back to that. Could you just give us a little bit of detail on the management analyst position? And again, what was kind of the role of that position in the development and rollout up to this point? And then what does the duties of that position look like in essentially managing that position, that system moving forward?
Bob Mergel for the record. So that person initially was like the head lead person in dealing with the vendor and getting the reservation system up and operational. That person still does that because the reservation system isn't, there are continuing issues with the reservation system, And in talking to people in my position throughout the state, that never goes away. Turns out there isn't a perfect reservation system out there, and things are constantly changing. So you have to have somebody that is that liaison, if you will, between us and the reservation system vendor. So she still has weekly calls, if not more than that, with the reservation vendor to make some tweaks here and there, because there's some stuff that the system should do and can't do, and so we're still trying to work through that. And then there's just the day-to-day visitors trying to interact with the reservation system, and it doesn't work how they want it to, and so we have to have somebody that can walk them through that. Our staff try to do it, but sometimes our staff need somebody to walk them through it also. And so right now our MA person is the one that knows everything about the reservation system. The other part of that is that, as we all know, the state will only allow you to stay in contract for so long. And we will be doing this all over again very soon, because the contract will expire and we will have to go out to bid again and start from not exactly square one, but pretty close. So.
All right, thank you for that. And now coming back to kind of the funding piece. So, I think when I looked at this and the background on it, as you mentioned, I think the understanding that we were under is that we would be utilizing those ARPA funds to get this set up, and that essentially some of that fee revenue would help maintain the program moving forward, so that we wanted to, as much as possible, avoid financial cliffs where we paid for things with federal funding that we're going to need ongoing general fund support. So here we are looking at a request for general fund support. You said we're kind of not there currently, but there is essentially the opportunity to get there or move in that direction, but those fees haven't materialized yet. You mentioned Sand Harbor has not gone online for a full season yet for that reservation system. So I guess, can you just speak to what the current either projections or the current plans are to get us to a more sustainable point where essentially those fees, either the current fees, maybe those fees need to be adjusted a little bit, but give us a little bit of a sense of what the plan is to get to a more sustainable position where we're not covering these ongoing expenses with general fund.
Sure. Bob Miguel for the record. So as I mentioned, with that split in revenue, we're projecting we'll bring in enough to be able to pay for the management analyst position. There may be some amount left over to help offset that lump sum cost. What we don't know is how much revenue we're actually going to end up generating that we're going to be able to keep once Sand Harbor has an entire season. So once we make it through an entire 6 months of running Sand Harbor with reservations, we might end up with enough money, but I don't know that. And I what I do know is we have to pay our bills, right? I know that we can't afford to lose the reservation system because we couldn't pay for it. So as we get through this next year where we actually have the reservation system in place for a solid year at Sand Harbor, we might be just fine. And maybe that's going to generate enough revenue where we don't need to supplement it anymore. Once we get through this contract, we can renegotiate how much money goes to who. It's just that's not the model that we went with, and now we're kind of stuck because we're in this contract for multiple biennia, right? And we funded it with one source, and that money's just gone. So,
thank you. And then when is that contract coming up?
You happen to remember this coming? So, Bob Miguel, for the record, this this upcoming year.
Okay, thank you. So, I guess, we want to make sure that this system continues, and I think you've provided a lot of clear justification on. There's just some uncertainty. We need to get a little further down the road, and so we want to make sure that we have the resources there to do that. I don't want to get. I know this isn't a closing meeting, but I just want to make it clear to you and to the other members of the department that I am concerned about essentially building this into the base budget with general fund moving forward. So we want to make sure that you have the resources to get through this upcoming season, to learn from that, and kind of chart a path forward and figure out also what, as you go into a contract renewal, how we can get to a place where this is a little bit more self-sustained, and would want to make sure that we're coming back and revisiting this and how it's funded in the future to try and get this piece itself in a more self-supported position so that it is not general funded moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there as I think what would give at least me and probably some other members of this committee some more comfort with how we address this moving forward. And then I believe we have a question from Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Administrator. Always good to hear updates from parks. I think I've been at all of them, or certainly at most of them. My question is regarding the reservation system. That includes parking, because there's a whole separate thing. I know on the Tahoe Oversight Committee that I was on, we talked a lot about making reservations for parking positions. Is that something the state parks is doing? That's a separate entity that's doing that.
Bob Mergel, for the record. So it is not, it doesn't have anything to do with the parking up in the basin. Our reservation system is solely to get into Sand Harbor.
So if they have a reservation, are they obviously they must be guaranteed a parking spot?
Bob Mergel, for the record, in their guaranteed admittance into Sand Harbor, where yes, we have parking inside of Sand Harbor.
Right, so there's no additional fee. If they do their day reservation, they come in and that includes parking?
Bob Mergel, for the record, so that includes when they make the reservation fee is $5. The entrance for the day is $10. Or $15 if your vehicle isn't registered in Nevada. So at the time that they're making their reservation, they're paying $15 or they're paying $20, and then that gets them into the park.
Right.
So they don't have any additional fee once they get there.
Okay, so they've paid at the time to get in. The second question sounds exciting, the Cave Lake finally is full. Have you been working has NDOW been involved with that, with restocking that lake as a cooperative through the park system?
Bob Mergel, for the record, yes, they're planning on restocking it, and then they're going to be involved with us on that day
Opening
of
day.
the grand reopening. Yep.
Because I've fished it a lot, so I'm excited to hear it and trying to put that date down on my calendar. So I'm excited to know that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
I'm sorry. Sorry. Can I ask one more question?
Okay.
Relevant to Cave Lake. So we heard from NDOW that they're doing some, will there be some classes with their boats, kayaking, fishing that day there? Do you have any idea of cooperation? I'll
I think
reach out to
that sounds
NDOW.
like an NDOW question.
I'll ask him, but I didn't know if the state parks is going to be involved with that.
Bob Mergel, for the record, I do not know
Okay.
if they're doing any formal boating education or anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I think it's still going to be a great opening event. I have marked it on my calendar as well. I see we have folks from the governor's finance office here. So help make sure that we can all get there because it's right after sine die of the regular session. I believe we have another question from Assemblymember Brown Bay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I do have a question relative to credit card fees. And I know it's a little bit off the beaten path. One of the things that I noticed that we do as a state, as we look at our backup material, is that we're not passing on credit card fees to the person who's using the credit card. I'm just curious to know, is that methodology going to continue? It looks like we have $160,000 in fee expenses for '26 and $148,000 in FY '27. There are some divisions that pass credit card fees on to the person who's using the credit card, and then there are some divisions that don't. I'm curious to know why this division doesn't, and have you thought about that for future biennia? How do we recoup that money?
Bob Mergel for the record. So yes, we've had that conversation, and part of it is when we went through an audit, I don't know, 3-4 sessions ago, whatever it was, I don't know. Anyway, one of the issues that we struggled with is dealing with cash, right? So we went with self-pay kiosks that take electronic funding. Cash is just problematic for us, right? So we're trying to encourage people to pay electronically, and so when people learn that they can get into the park for $10 with cash or for $11.27 if they use their credit or debit card, they're going to use cash. And so it's going the opposite direction of what we're trying to do, because when somebody's in line, they pay $10, the person behind them that's with them swipes their card and they get charged more, it becomes problematic for us. And like I said, it's just sending the wrong message in that we're almost encouraging people to go back the other direction, and it's just way more complicated for us and our staff to handle cash and do those kind of deposits. So we were back and forth on it, and yes, it costs us more. And the more we encourage people, and with the reservation system, you pretty much have to use electronic payment for that. So yes, that fee just keeps going up and up and up. But that was how we came to that, is that we didn't want people paying two different fees depending on whether they were paying with cash, and then ultimately trying to keep people from paying cash.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder, as we continue to evolve the financial systems, if that there are other methodologies that allow people to use electronic transfers where they don't incur fees. And not to shout out anyone in particular, but PayPal, Zelle, right? There are lots and lots of cash-to-cash transactions that exist today that didn't exist perhaps 3 biennia ago, that we could help to continue to move us to no cash at parks while still not absorbing that fee for anyone who wants to use credit. And so I'm just curious to know, potentially, if you would be willing to look at that as we move into this next biennium or the next budgeting cycle, as a way for us to decrease costs associated with the operation while still enabling your staff to not have to take cash, and decreasing the fees that we're absorbing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I saw a head nod, so we'll just take that as a yes, something that will be evaluated. I, for one, would definitely just pay an extra $1 in processing fees to use a credit card, because I often don't have cash or enough cash on me. So I do think that this is something, I appreciate the information you provided, but I do think that it's something that we should probably reevaluate moving forward, looking forward. So maybe put that on your to-do list. Because I do think that, this is a direction that we're seeing more and more state agencies go. And as you noted, I think with the reservation system in particular, but also just with trends in how consumers like to conduct transactions, we're going to see that number continue to go up. And I think as long as folks have options, we can essentially start to decrease that burden on the state and hopefully increase funding available to support all the good work that the division's doing. So, members, any additional questions for state parks? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the Division of Water Resources.
Good morning, Chair Watts, members of the committee. My name is Adam Sullivan, State Engineer and Administrator of the Division of Water Resources. And with me is Chris Thorson, who's our Deputy Administrator. So I'm going to start with an overview of what the division budget supports. I'll talk about some accomplishments in the current biennium and the direction of the division. And then I'll turn it over to Chris, who's going to go through the individual items and talk about the numbers for the current budget build and what that can support. What this division does is to carry out Nevada water law and use the best available science to protect the resource and support and protect the needs of Nevada's water users. Specifically, this includes water rights administration, groundwater management, well drilling, we keep records of water use, and we oversee the state dam safety program, among many other services. So groundwater depletion is a major risk in our daily lives, and this is one of the maps that we've generated to kind of help visualize where the issues are or potentially will be in the future. There's heightened attention statewide on what we're doing as a state to address this issue, how the division is able to fulfill its role, and to protect the public resource. Water security go back. Water security really is essential for economic development and diversification. It's essential for public health. It's essential for protecting the natural environment. All these things get funneled through our division. And there's a lot of opportunities looking forward for our office to meet these needs over time. And as a division, what we're trying to do is position ourselves as best we can to just meet these needs for the 21st century. For this is the driest state in the nation, water security is critical. So in 2022, our division developed a 5-year plan that really focused on prioritizing the highest needs, and this we used to help with the previous budget build for the biennium that we're in now. So the 7 goals that were in this plan are listed here with these green bars showing progress to date, relative progress. All of these elements have moved forward to some degree, and to a large extent that's because it was supported in our current budget, or at least directly or indirectly supported in our current budget. There's still more to do if we want to keep up this pace and really have a high-functioning modern state agency to meet our needs. So the goals from this plan are, 1, to improve efficiency and timeliness in water rights processing. That's represented by that first bullet. Secondly, to expand some of our programs to meet public needs and public safety, specifically dam safety program and the adjudications. Third, public outreach, really to share the data that we have, to get public input on the decisions that we make that affect a lot of different people, and really try to get ahead of some of the problems with groundwater depletion and what the options realistically are. Fourth, staff development has been one of our priorities, to improve retention, provide opportunities, and support our staff. So the bottom 3 on this list are in orange, and that indicates that they were able to advance with some help from ARPA funds, as well as ongoing staff efforts to accomplish these goals, and all of these still remain a priority as well. First, the Nevada Water Initiative. This is a cooperative effort between the division, the DRI, and the United States Geological Survey, Nevada Water Science Center. And really what we're trying to do here is update the baseline scientific information that we need as a state to be able to make defensible and accurate decisions for determinations of water availability. Next is the State Water Plan. This was last updated in 1999, so there's a current effort to revise that. And then last, digitization and modernization, which is an ongoing priority. In addition to streamlining public services, This is also important to protect and preserve historic records that go back over 120 years and really improve our internal workflow. So this slide identifies more specifically what we've accomplished over this current biennium. Staff vacancies in our division have dropped to 6%. It's really good. We have good applicants, and the people that work for our division really recognize the importance of this public service. As for the work we do, I've divided this into 3 general areas of accomplishments. All of these have been able to move along with the help of 10 new staff positions that were created in the 2023 budget. That's made a huge difference for us. First, water supply information. We've been able to fund the continuation of stream flow gauges and water level monitoring in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey. These are data that we need for making water deliveries, for forecasting water supply, and it's all publicly available. We've also improved water use data and availability. These are sort of subcomponents of the overall Nevada Water Initiative, which is a bigger endeavor. But for that, the Nevada Water Initiative, we've made a lot of progress on phase 1 of that in the last 2 to 3 years. So second category, modernization. This includes digital record keeping and providing more web-based services. We've scanned about 98,000 water rights maps, and we can now receive a number of different filings and payments electronically. We've also funded much-needed revisions in flood hazard indicators. For example, stream stats and the probable maximum precipitation. These are engineering tools, and they were specifically funded in the current budget. Third, with water rights, we've been able to reduce our backlog and to improve some internal efficiencies in how we process this work. This is interrelated with the modernization effort, and again, greatly supported with the addition of 10 new staff. We've also prioritized public outreach as much as we can, and again, having more staff really helps with that. This area of water rights is really critical because it's getting increasingly complex and contentious. There's very little unappropriated water available, so mostly what we're dealing with is changes of existing rights and considering or preventing potential conflict. And this is where the Nevada Water Initiative gets applied and will be critical for us going into the future to continue to support this public needs. Okay. So our key priorities for the budget going forward are to maintain this momentum and keep building operational efficiency for the 21st century and still adhering to these foundational principles of Nevada water law. This is still guided by our strategic plan, and there's a few foundational principles that we see to really help keep moving this in the right direction. So robust data collection, I'm referring to stream flow measurements, water use data, dam safety inspections to keep up with the industry. We're doing well with what we have in-house. The risk here is to have the capacity to continue funding some of the gauges that we already have in place, as well as some of the federal funding that we rely upon. Secondly, digital and automated processing. Again, continuing to provide web-based services and get away from paper-only transactions, which a lot of our operations are still there. The risk here is being able to maintain just the baseline software that we rely upon to keep that operational. And then third, science-driven decisions. This is just a necessary foundation so our work is accurate and defensible, and we're treating everybody the same. There's a lot of great work that's being done in the state. There's a lot of tradition about being leadership in Nevada in groundwater science. And again, as the driest state in the nation, we really need to keep applying that work to the administration of water law. So that's my overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris for more of the details on the budget build.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Chris Thorson, like Adam said, Deputy Administrator for the Division of Water Resources. last name spelled Thorson. So the division's recommended budget for the next biennium is just shy of 25 million. Of this, 5% does come from federal funds. These funds are in form of grants that support our operating costs for our dam safety program, the floodplain management program and the staff involved in that, which work with local communities to help reduce losses during a flood, and also ensures that Nevada meets the National Flood Insurance Program goals. The third thing it funds is the mapping effort down in Fallon, Nevada, in cooperation with the Federal Water Master and the Bureau of Reclamation. Lastly, these funds help support enhancements in staffing that manage our database that the public uses every day to submit water use, and it also allows them to track their water use as they submit their data real time. The total number of employees this next fiscal year is dropping from 84 to 76, but that's just because of the IT and GIS consolidation within the department. So currently we have 10 positions that fall within that are going to be moving from under the division to the department. And there are 2 additional staff being proposed to be added, which are associated with our digitization efforts that Adam was talking about. So this slide kind of shows how the funds are broken out each fiscal year. 75% of it goes to staffing. The next largest portion is the cost allocation, which is directly goes to the director's office and the attorney general's office. 8% goes to our operating and travel needs, and the remaining 2% goes towards maintaining the stream flow and underground measurement network that Adam discussed. The state currently pays 65% of this cost. The other 35% is funded by USGS. This network of measurements is vital for water management, monitoring floods, and also to monitor the health of these sources throughout the year and trending backwards, because this is all publicly available data and it goes back for decades. The division is currently looking for alternative funding partners to help maintain these existing services. If not, we'll have to make some decisions on which gauges to keep, which ones will need to be discontinued, and which ones our staff will need to do ourselves, but not really make that public or that data publicly available. And those are to ensure that we are distributing water in accordance with court decrees and other agreements. So now we're going to run through the enhancements that were included within this budget. The first one maintains the division's mapping capabilities, and really this enhancement is just to maintain our existing services and abilities, and it was because the software provider went from a floating license to a basically subscription base, just like everyone else these days. So that is what that cost is. The next one is expiring the ARPA grant, or the authority in the existing budget. The authority is in our existing fiscal year and is going to roll forward to cover those 2 projects. And the other one here is what I mentioned, the IT and GIS consolidation. I'm sure you've heard about that a few times, but that's just moving our staff under the department. And that's the combination of those 2 enhancement units, so the loss and then the increased director's cost allocation. Next, we'll go into the position enhancements. The first is to reclassify a manager position down in Southern Nevada to an unclassified office manager / chief. It's really to help promote retention and also enhance the services we already provide down in Las Vegas. The current position requires a PE, but we don't really need a professional engineer in Southern Nevada, but really to try and maintain our services. The Southern Nevada office assists the public on a daily basis. They also conduct a lot of necessary field work and represents the division and Adam at multiple meetings throughout the year. The second one is to reclassify a supervising professional engineer to administrative law judge. The supervising professional engineer is in the hearing section, and really what we need is additional support to conduct hearings and make decisions. As Adam mentioned, that managing the water resources in Nevada has become increasingly way more complex, and this position ensures that the decisions coming out of our office are utilizing the best available science and adhering to Nevada's water law. Also, this change will, as I mentioned, will aid in the time it takes for us to make these decisions and get them out to the public so we can continue moving forward as a state. The last one on this slide, as I mentioned, is continuing 2 full-time positions that are leading our digitization efforts. These 2 positions will continue working towards digitizing our records. However, as Adam said, we won't be able to move forward with accessible digital records for the public until we can secure funding for the necessary software. Last slide, going to cover the 2 one-shot appropriations. We got 2 vehicles that are being replaced that have met the replacement schedule. And the last one is replacing our hearing room equipment, conference equipment for our hearing room, which is currently utilized by a lot of people within the department and our agency to hold large open meeting law type meetings. And also to replace a couple scanners that are used for our digitization effort. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Adam.
Just some closing comments that I have. We've been able to make a lot of good progress over this last biennium, and there's some elements in our current budget that'll really help us keep moving forward to complement our staff efforts. There's some other areas where we're looking to adjust our timelines or expectations to be realistic. Our overall long-term goals will stay the same, and we'll keep moving in that direction and stay focused on that. We're also looking at some alternative funding sources to support our longer-term objectives, like Chris mentioned, stream gauging, the Nevada Water Initiative. These remain high priorities for us, and smart water management is just really critical in it's such an arid state, and so we'll continue to do the best we can. And with that, we're available for any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We do have a few questions. I think first we're going to start with one from Senator Wynn.
Hi there. Thank you so much for that. I feel like I ask these questions every committee, and so I'm going to start with you. Can you give us an update on the progress of the ARPA-funded projects to modernize and digitize the state water records? I know that those funds have a deadline to expend of December 31st, 2026. Do we look like we are on track to expend those funds completely?
Adam Sullivan for the record, and I'll let Chris fill in any gaps here if I miss it, but we will absolutely spend all those funds. Going into this, we knew that there was a lot more that we could do in the long term, so we're really just trying to catch up and do the best we can with the funds available. We're maximizing what we can do. We tried to set it up in a way that we would have as many deliverables within the, because recognizing that ARPA is a defined source, that we would have as many completion, deliverables by the end of that date. And so I focused on the maps, the water right maps that we carry. That's one of the deliverables that we can do. Establishing some of these upfront costs and getting that in place. And so to answer your question, absolutely we'll expend the funds, and we're set up in a way to be able to continue that work in whatever capacity we can.
When do you think those funds will be expended? Are you scheduled to have those ARPA funds expended well before that December 31st, 2026 date? Or are you looking at going up until that date? And I appreciate that. I understand that there's continuing projects that need to be done. And so it sounds like you phased in the priorities with these ARPA funds, knowing that they needed to be expended quickly. Do you have any more specific details about when those are expended?
Thanks for the question. Chris Thorson for the record. Yeah, we have a plan in place. Right now we're staffing up. Currently we have 5 contracted staff that are helping digitize all the records, and we're looking at procuring additional equipment so we can get more contracted staff on board to really start digitizing. So like Adam mentioned, we were focusing on the large maps, which require really large scanners, and those are pretty expensive. So we didn't have as many contracted staff, but now that we're getting into the 8.5 by 11 and normal size paper, we're looking to really staff up with contracted staff to get a lot of those records digitized. And the goal is, to expend it all, either at the deadline or prior to that, pretty close to it. Hopefully that answered your question.
If it's possible to get just some more specific details, there's a limited opportunity, obviously, to reclassify ARPA funds if we know that they are not going to be expended into other existing ARPA programs. So I think that's why I'm asking about some of these large expenditures to make sure, what the specific timelines are for some of these, as we've seen with so many of our digitizing and modernization and IT programs. What we anticipate will take 2 years, sometimes takes 22 years, and then eventually we have to abandon the programs. But so that's what I'm hoping to do. So if it's at all possible for you to give us more specific timelines on when those monies are expended and what the plan is for that, instead of just, we have plans, we're going to ramp it up, we're going to get people. I would love to have more specific details about that. That would be great.
Thank you, Senator. And if you can just work with our fiscal staff to get some additional information to us as a follow-up, that would be great. Next, we'll move on to Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm kind of going in the same way with that. And it's just basically the clarifying the timelines. But in this case, it has to do with the records digitization project. And when do you anticipate it would be done? Just so that way we have that idea. So it's kind of going along with the same questions that was just prior.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, thank you for that question. This is an ongoing effort. We have hundreds of thousands of map records. We have hundreds of thousands of water right permits that go back over 120 years. We have dam safety records. We have well drilling records. These are all critical documents, and a lot of them we just have a single copy on paper in our office. So to preserve this record, we just need to get there. We're going to do, and we'll provide more specific information about exactly what we can accomplish within this period with this ARPA fund. But as far as being, and we do have identified goals of what we can do and get done within that period. But from a larger perspective, we've always recognized that this is something that will continue to take time into the future to get there.
May I ask a follow-up? Thanks. So, I totally respect what you're saying, because we also want to, those are artifacts of our state as well. So we want to make sure to handle them with care, because they're so much a part of our history. But I mean, how many would you say, if there's a way, how many have you gotten through in the last year? And there are some files that are going to be very small. There are going to be some files that are very large. So if you can even just give us a ballpark of what you get through in a year, especially with identified goals already pointed out. Don't know if you've got that today, but if you can get that to us, is that a possibility?
Chris Thorson for the record. Yeah, we have, like Adam mentioned, we've scanned 98,000 maps. That was really the bulk of our work, and really it was to accommodate the 10 new positions because we didn't have space. And so that was our main focus, was getting space for those staff. And we're almost done with that project. And now we're going to be really focused on the quote unquote normal size paper. And that's what we're working on. Because our permit files are so dynamic, the maps aren't dynamic, right? They're pretty much static. But our permit files, there's paper added to those daily. And so trying to figure out the system of how to manage that dynamic file is really what our staff are working on. But right now we currently have, I was trying to look, we had some stats thrown at us yesterday. There's 94,000 individual permit files. And then just hearing files, which are static files, there's 64,000 documents associated with just old hearing records, or 640,000, sorry, correct that number. But we're anticipating to get that done prior to the ARPA funding getting completed. So with the hearing files, the permit files are really the one, and that's kind of what the request is for these two staff, is to continue managing that project moving forward. No, we weren't asking for contracted staff. We're looking at trying to utilize as much of our existing staff, but trying to manage this digital record system is beyond what our existing staff can handle.
And I just have one more question, if I may, Chair. I so appreciate that answer, because that was actually one of the questions was, why was the decision made to have, what metrics, I guess, were utilized to figure out that we want to have 2 full-time positions as opposed to just 1 full-time position or even contract staff? Because you had mentioned that in the question before, and then looking through the slides, I mean, they're mentioned on almost every single slide. So why was that? Why did the division decide upon this staff, this 2 full-time positions?
Chris Thorson for the record. So we have a management analyst that really is developing and managing the project. You know, it's kind of, it really, you know, the staff aren't going to be the ones doing a lot of the indexing, trying to manage that document management system. But once this goes out public, there's going to be a lot of questions on how to access this. As of right now, in order to access our records, you have to drive to Carson, and then you have to sit in our public room and look at the record. There's no other way to access the record as it sits today. There are some records that are online. You know, the maps are online, the well logs are online, but there's not a lot of records that are online. So really, once that becomes public, there's going to be a lot of support that's needed ongoing to support the public on how to access these. So, and then the second position is an admin assistant, which is really going to, as we're still continuing to get paper records, is scanning that and trying to get it into the system as we receive them. We are working towards receiving documents electronically, and that takes a while because a lot of that development is done in-house. So.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for that detailed information. Didn't even think about how the public would be able to access it. So really appreciate that answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I would just ask for you to provide some additional, while we're creating a list of follow-ups. You know, I think understanding the full scope of kind of the project, as well as an estimate of the timeline would be helpful. I think you provided some great context in terms of what was the first priority, what's coming next, and what additional work remains. It sounds like it's going to take a while, well, probably outside of the upcoming biennium as well. But we would like to have a better understanding of that because, again, you know, it sounds like the maps were really the focus of the ARPA funding, and we're going to get that done. There's additional digitization needed, but again, that's something that we also see as a discrete project to get caught up, and then we know that there is going to be ongoing expenses to assist the public, to maintain and update files as additional paperwork comes in moving forward. But again, we want to have a really strong understanding of what's kind of the project funding needed to catch up and digitize historical records. When are we going to get to that point? And then what does the kind of staffing look like to maintain things moving forward? And so, you know, again, just as I kind of mentioned to state parks, we want to kind of understand those things and figure out what are the enhancements that we need to look at on a biennium basis for the project, and then eventually what are going to be those ongoing expenses that we will probably need to essentially build into the budget on an ongoing basis. So with that, I believe we have another question from Senator Nguyen.
1 second. It's kind of, sorry, I was distracted. We were actually talking about this earlier, about the administrative law judge positions and how they're not necessarily attorneys. Can you kind of explain the recommended conversion from that existing supervisor professional engineer position to that administrative law position, and how, as well as like your ability to recruit for that position, you know, some of the qualifications, why you're seeking for that like conversion, I guess.
Adam Sullivan for the record. So this is identifying a bottleneck in our workflow. This position is an attorney, so that would be a requirement of the job. We've set the salary where we believe it is competitive, and we have had some very high quality candidates express interest. Again, Chris talked about that in the opening testimony, but it's addressing this bottleneck because some of the decisions that we're making are highly contentious and just require that additional capacity for us to hold hearings that are thorough and issue decisions that are backed up by the data and defensible. So really, it's just identifying a bottleneck in how our workflow is going that we didn't have 10 or 20 years ago.
That's good to hear. We weren't sure in this position if it was an actual attorney. I know sometimes when we're looking at administrative law judge positions within other agencies, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, actual legal positions. So I guess that kind of leads into my second question. And during the last legislative session, we approved the initial legal position for the division, and under that decision unit E806, and under this decision unit E806, you would add a second position. Can you kind of elaborate on the various legal issues facing this division that require that additional legal position as, in this context?
Adam Sullivan for the record. Water rights administration is getting more and more difficult. Like I said, there is very little new water to appropriate. What we're talking about is changes of existing rights. There is deference placed on the state engineer's office towards matters of factual questions of fact. But anything that we do that is an interpretation of or an application of law that might be, any decision that we make is subject to judicial review, and increasingly our decisions are appealed for a wide range of reasons. And to have two administrative law judges within our agency helps with our capacity and helps with us getting ahead of challenges so that our decisions are well-founded, and we're just being as efficient and accurate as we can, so we don't have any unnecessary legal challenges. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
Chair, may I follow up? I realize that this is a very contentious and complicated and complex area of law. Do you have a backup in addressing these cases currently that would be alleviated by having that second administrative law judge position? And what percentage currently of the cases do people appeal and seek that judicial review?
Adam Sullivan for the record. Yes, absolutely, would help with our backlog in decision making. I don't have the statistics exactly at my fingertips, but that's something I could prepare and provide to you.
I'm just curious whether or not people are just litigious and they're always going to appeal the administrative law judge. And so if you had 1, 2, or 10, you would still run into some of those same issues, or whether or not this would actually seek to curb, I guess, any of that potential. The need, you said, for this second position was to address, the increasing number of judicial reviews of those decisions. So I'm wondering where that nexus is. And so if you have any additional information you might be able to provide the committee on connecting those two things, I think it would be appreciated.
All right, thank you. Members, any additional questions for the division? All right, seeing none, thank you both very much for the presentation. And that will bring us to our last budget account of the day, which is state lands.
Good morning, Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair. Charlie Donahue, Donohue, I'm the administrator for the Division of State Lands, and in that capacity, I also serve as the State Land Registrar. Happy to be before this committee today and happy to talk about our budget. With me is the Deputy Administrator for the agency, Ellery Stoller. If we get into some deep dives into questions, I'll probably need her assistance. I was thinking about my comments last evening, and it kind of drives me crazy when somebody puts up their mission statement and then they just read it back to you, so I won't do that. But one of the things that, looking at our mission statement, really resonated with me is that it really captures the work the agency does, and it captures the units. When we talk about land stewardship, it makes me think of our state land office and our land agents who authorize third-party use and also acquire and dispose of real property for different state agencies. When I think about the environmental improvement, it makes me think about the Nevada Tahoe Resource Team, which is an interagency, interdisciplinary team that implements the environmental improvement program up at Lake Tahoe. When I think about responsible land use planning, I think about our state land use planning agency and the work that that individual does with the rural communities throughout our great state. So I think staff years ago really nailed our mission statement, and I just wanted to share that with you. We're here to talk about 4173. That's our principal budget. The agency is principally funded through the general fund. We also have some FTEs that are funded through bond proceeds to implement the environmental improvement program up at Lake Tahoe, as well as our planner is funded by an alternative source, a grant that the department receives from the Department of Energy. Currently, the agency has 19 FTEs, but if our budget is approved through this process, we'll actually be losing 2 positions, and we'll have 17 FTEs. Those positions are our GIS analyst as well as our business process analyst. There are GIS IT positions which are moving into the, proposed to be moved into the director's office through consolidation. The agency only has one slide of enhancements, so I will be brief. We are requesting a little bit more in travel funds, so myself, as the Vice President of the National Association of State Trust Lands, can travel and possibly have the deputy travel as well to an annual meeting for that association. They do good work, and it's always helpful to engage with your membership and from other states. Our second proposal is the elimination of special use category 63 and 65. We've been talking to this body for probably 3 sessions now that at some point we would lose the interest that we receive from our bonds that fund these positions. The category 63 is our Tahoe program manager, and 65 is the admin assistant who helps pay bills, reimburse funding agreement requests, and things along that line. The other enhancement here is just the flip side of that, moving those two positions into general fund so that they can continue to carry out the good work that they do. We have a request for equipment replacement that's schedule driven. It's principally our computer hardware. And then, as I mentioned before, the DCNR IT centralization, that dollar value would be removed from Land's budget and placed into the director's office budget. And with that, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Donahue. I do have one question. Do you have any updates for us on the Grant Sawyer building?
Charlie Donahue, Administrator for the Division of State Lands. I don't see how that is any at all relevant to this presentation, sir. Yes, we continue. So we have tried both times unsuccessfully to solicit the Grant Sawyer building and had 2 auctions with no bids. We are now moving forward with what statute doesn't require us to do. It allows me to do under 321.335, and that's to list the property with a broker who will go and market that for the state. The unique thing about that statute is that while it affords me the opportunity to list it with the broker, it is silent on whether I need to dispose of it at the appraised value. And that has been a stumbling point for people who have expressed interest. So Ellery and I are both very hopeful that this element is successful and we dispose of that property for the state.
Thank you very much. Members, any additional questions for the Division of State Lands? All right. Seeing none, that wasn't so bad.
No. Rather enjoyable. Thank you. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you. You as well. All right, members, that concludes our budget hearings for today. We have one item left on our agenda, which is public comment. Again, if you'd like to provide public comment by phone, please call 888-475-4499. And when prompted, provide the meeting ID 815-3878-5803 and then press pound. So, anyone wishing to provide public comment here in Carson City, please come forward. Same in Las Vegas. I don't think anyone's down there right now. All right, we'll begin here in Carson City. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Watts, Chair Taylor, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Jane Amone, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We urge full support for the budget requests for Nevada's divisions of water resources, state parks, and state lands. We appreciate the work that these agencies do every day to steward Nevada's lands and waters. Regarding water and DWR specifically, Nevada is the driest state in the nation, and water is a limiting factor for nature communities and for economic development. The prolonged drought in Nevada has exacerbated this need and created an urgency to ensure water security for both people and the environment. It is imperative that the Division of Water Resources, which protects, manages, and enhances the state's water resources for Nevada's citizens, be fully staffed and resourced to meet this challenge. The Nevada Water Resources Initiative is an important program to highlight. Using ARPA funds, DWR has begun a statewide reassessment of water budgets, but this funding is not enough to complete the work. And DWR should be provided with sufficient funding to finish updating these budgets with the assistance of DRI and the USGS. The State Water Plan and records digitization and modernization efforts are also important ARPA-funded programs to continue. These programs will enable the state engineer to work with the best available science that he can use for managing the state's groundwater. The future of Nevada's water resources and economic stability depend on the effective management of water resources, and we urge the legislature to provide sufficient funds for the division to achieve its goals. Thank you so much for considering our comment.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Madison Tran. That's MADISON TRAN for the record. I am here today to urge increased funding for the Nevada State Department of Conservation and Environmental Protection, specifically for the abandoned mine lands, or otherwise known as the AML. So, as a part of a year-long biology project, my research partner and I investigated the environmental and public health impacts of abandoned mine tailings in Nevada. We conducted a site visit to the Pyramid Mining District and collected a water sample from Mullen Creek, downstream of several abandoned mines, including the Red Bluff uranium mine. We then tested our sample at the Nevada State Public Health Laboratory, and the results were alarming. Heavy metals like arsenic, lead, iron, manganese, and aluminum all exceeded safe drinking water standards. These contaminants threaten both human health and Nevada's groundwater-dependent ecosystems. This is not an isolated case. In 2009, wells in Lyon County near old copper mines were found to contain uranium levels 100 times the legal limit, after residents have been drinking from them for decades. Nevada ranks first in the U.S. for toxic releases per square mile, and abandoned mines continue to pollute our water through acid mine drainage and heavy metal leaching. The AML program works to remediate these sites using techniques like capping, waste removal, and water treatment. However, the scale of the problem far exceeds their resources. At the current level of funding, experts estimate it would take at least 500 years to fully assess and address abandoned mine contaminations across the United States. Our research confirms what scientists and environmental advocates have been saying for years. We have the knowledge and tools to reduce contamination, but without proper funding, those solutions remain out of reach. I urge this committee to increase investment in the AML program to protect Nevada's water, public health, and ecosystems before more communities suffer the consequences. Thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Tran. Seeing no one else coming forward in person, and seeing no one coming forward in Las Vegas, AVH, would anyone like to provide public comment by phone?
To provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Barry Johnston, Las Vegas, BERRYJOHNSTON. I'm urging this body to end the outdated and dangerous practice of water fluoridation in Nevada and redirect those funds so it truly matters, clean, safe drinking water. Right now, counties are spending public money to add fluosilicic acid, an industrial fertilizer byproduct, to our water. It's not pharmaceutical grade, it's waste. We've been told it helps teeth, but the science is clear. Fluoride works topically, not ingested. Do you drink sunscreen or do you put it on your skin? Meanwhile, if you look at the Environmental Working Group's report on the Las Vegas Valley Water District, you'll see we have alarming levels of contaminants, arsenic above health guidelines, nitrates, chromium, and radioactive elements like radium-226. All the while, taxpayers are paying to drink a neurotoxin that has been linked to lower IQs in children, thyroid problems, and bone damage. Instead of dumping toxic byproducts into our drinking water, that budget should go to real filtration, reverse osmosis, activated carbon, and PFAS removal technology. Governor Lombardo and our federal delegation should have tackled this years ago. Low quality water in southern Nevada is a federal issue. This committee should demand accountability and redirection of funds away from chemical dumping towards water purification. We should not be in business of medicating people without their consent, especially with waste. So I ask you today, do the right thing, end fluoridation, fund real filtration, and protect the people. If our congressional delegation can't pull their head out of dark places and go and figure out how to get us more water with the other states, this is just a failure of a bureaucracy. Have a great day.
Thank you. AVH, next caller, please.
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide public comment.
All right, thank you, members. That concludes our agenda for the day. I believe we will have our final hearings in this subcommittee on Thursday, March 27th. With that, we're adjourned.